Hello and welcome to the Keto Man's Club podcast.
We're glad you're here, where each week we talk about men's health and lifestyle.
We do so with the foundation of the ketogenic diet and lifestyle.
If you don't know what keto is, stick around and you'll find out.
The podcast will bring you real, honest fun.
Each week we strive to uncover the tips and tricks that you can use in your everyday life to maximize your overall health.
Find the clearest path to becoming the best version of yourself that you were meant to be.
Welcome to this week's episode of the Keto Man's Club podcast. My name is Chris. I'm one of the hosts, and this week Alberto is out. He's kind of having to do the work thing, so we'll be missing him. He's getting on a plane, to be precise. So he would have a very hard time staying connected to the podcast feed tonight. But I am joined, as always, by Jim. How's it going, Jim?
I'm just trying to figure out if there could be a variation on the Mile High Club for the Keto Man's Club. That if we could get him up in the air kind of thing. But the Mile High Club has a whole different definition than what our group ever gets into. So probably just going to stay out of that now that I say that. But yeah, we'll leave it anyway. So life is good. How about you, sir?
It's pretty good. Keep him very busy. It is the season at work. And so we're prepping for a busy period of life here in the next couple months at the company named after a fruit. And and so we will, I will be working overtime and things like that and trying to keep up with all my podcasts and whatnot. So it's going to be an interesting little bit of time to stay focused and everything. I'm kind of a little bummed right now. Had a little discourse a little bit with the liquid folks today because I went to Amazon to try to restock. My case of 12 had run out, and I went to and everything was sold out. And I'm going, hopefully that just means business is really good. And, and all of that. Well, they said, yes, business is really good. And part of what's going on right now is they're doing some upgrades. So look for liquid to come back with a vengeance very soon, hopefully. But yeah, I'm missing my caffeine and BHB fix. I'm going to have to find something else. I've kind of gotten used to one of those daily to get me going in the morning.
It is kind of a nice kickoff to the day. I completely agree.
Yeah, it really is. It's, it just wakes the brain up and wakes the body up. And that's a good combo.
It is. It
That's
absolutely is.
Okay. Well, any news in the keto world that you wanted to talk about this week? Or I know that, I've not noticed anything like crazy news reports or anything like that.
I've talked to a lot of people. It's not really keto so much as meat, but it's the as we get into, I live in Southern Indiana, so we're starting to get into some of the fall temps. And people are starting to think about being outside and cooking out again, or wrapping up cooking out before it gets cold, snowy, all of that good stuff. And everybody's talking about the different things that they like to grill out, steaks, brats, things like that. And it's just a reminder to me of how people who are following keto, if they ever feel stuck, there's so many different options out there. Just beyond a hamburger or a steak, but really doctoring it up with kind of the whatever's in the fridge kind of thing. One of our former guests, Joey, put something up on Facebook in the Keto Man's Club about taking some cabbage and some mustard and some cheese and some ground beef and some spices and things, and came up with something didn't really have a name for it. But he said it was actually really good. So don't ever feel limited in what your choices are, because there's always something available out there to jump on and try. And a lot of this is trial and error. A lot of people have their things about, I want meatloaf. I saw this in the group a while back, and somebody asked if you could use crushed pork rinds as kind of like a binding agent for meatloaf. And then guys started chiming, oh yeah, I'll do this, and sugar-free ketchup, or this instead of ketchup, and all kinds. I mean, it just there's always a way to work through it and work around it. So I throw that out, not really as a news bit, but just a FYI.
Sure.
The group is a great resource. Our members are great resources that if you're
Mhm.
wanting to try something, somebody out there probably has found a way to do it.
Yep, you're absolutely right. My wife, when she does, and this was even a pre-keto thing, but one of the things that she does instead of just basic ketchup on a meatloaf, and she does make a keto meatloaf without the pork rinds because she refuses to use pork rinds for breading or that type of thing.
Uh-huh.
But she'll make a meatloaf and her tomato sauce, the base for it is actually sriracha. And so it makes for
Ooh.
it makes for a nice little spicy kick to it without being too overly one way or another. So it's kind of a nice alternative, and that isn't overly sweet. It doesn't have a lot of it's more chili than it is ketchup and that or tomato
Right.
sauce. So
Mhm.
that's a good alternative if you like it a little bit spicy. So yeah, there's alternatives. There's ways to tweak all of that, and that actually segues really nicely into our guest this week. We have Steve Barrons. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and he is another podcaster, Tactical Kitchen. Is that accurate?
That's what it is.
Okay. So he knows a little bit about food, I have a feeling, but we are interested in his story as well as what he can bring to the table. Sorry, I'm very punny tonight.
You've been planning this all week, Chris.
No, I haven't.
It's
I haven't. It all just kind of flows off the top of the head.
You're serving it up, man.
Yeah.
Oh, it's too good.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Steve, go ahead and let's start out with who you are, kind of where you come from, where you live now. Bring us up to kind of, maybe where you found keto, and kind of if you want to dive right on in, you can, but just kind of get us started.
Okay. Well, originally I'm from Fort Worth, Texas, which is the heartland of Texas is like what I like to call it. That's where I grew up, and
Yeah.
I was here up until I joined the military back in 1990-ish. I joined the Air Force, and throughout my Air Force career, I was in a career field called combat control, which is a special operations career field. So, a great job. I was very lucky. I grew up watching Rambo and Commando and all those crazy movies, and I got to do all that in the military. You jump out of airplanes, you scuba dive, you blow stuff up. That's your job. So that's your day to day, which for me was better than having a job. So I was really lucky in that aspect of, finding a job that was great. I did that for 21 years. And then when I retired, I was in Florida, and for about 3 years, I just did contracting. I hung out there. And that's when, I was about retired at 41. So that's all you guys out there know. That's about when your health issues start to creep up on you.
Mm-hmm.
For years, being in the military, and especially in the job I was in, we were always in really good physical shape. And talk about type A guys. Everybody was always racing everybody out trying to outlift everyone. Be bigger, stronger, all that kind of stuff. So, you're always competitive. And I did triathlons for years, not full Ironmans, but I just did the Olympic or sprint distance triathlons for fun. And so I was always used to being in really good shape. But after I retired and, kind of slowed down a little bit, that's when the middle starts to creep up on you. You guys know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
And that's kind of when we started dabbling or started really looking into diet and how it affects us, because I had a couple of health issues, and also had to add that, that's about the same time where, I got onto my second marriage, or my perfect marriage is what I like to call it. Reconnected with a high school sweetheart, and we got, married. So we're both on second marriages, and, we were living the good life. And she is a classically trained chef. So she's, trained, went to school, and she can cook anything that you can think of. So if you can imagine, two people getting together, you kind of get into that, food is fun and food is happiness kind of gig.
Mm-hmm.
And so started putting on the weight and trying to work it off. Didn't really work. And then I started having health issues. I had a disc, my C5 burst on me.
Ooh.
And causing a lot of nerve damage. So I went through a period where probably of 2 months where I couldn't lay down. I could only stand up.
How'd you sleep?
So I basically didn't. I was a complete zombie. I took a bunch of drugs. I leaned up against the wall a lot. I would, I could sit down and like slump over in a chair forward, but I couldn't lay back. So
Oh
this
my
went on.
gosh.
Yeah, it was. And, you know, up until that point, I'd never experienced nerve pain, and I never really understood it when people talked about it. And after that, I really understood it because I could take, you know, oxycodone. I could take 3 of those and it would knock me out for a couple hours. But I would come back after that, and then I would just be awake again, and wasn't a whole lot you could do about it. And then I'd go to work during the day, and I'd work all day and come home and just I would just zombie around the house all night. It was a weird space.
Yeah.
And my wife, Melody, who's very smart, very intelligent, she started researching, you know, anti-inflammatory diets. So this is where we really started kind of getting on the, hey, how do we decrease inflammation in the body without having to take all these external pharmaceuticals? And in addition to that, another piece of the puzzle for us was I had a son I do have a son. He's still here. Who we were homeschooling because he was diagnosed as on the autism spectrum, and he was non-functional in school. He could not participate in a classroom because he had a sensory processing disorder. He could not absorb all the information going on. It was too much for him. So we were dealing with that kind of at the same time that I was dealing with my spinal surgery. So, you know, she was homeschooling him because he had basically zeros in every class, and he was in the 5th grade, and he just couldn't function. I had to go to school basically every day to pull him out because he was non-responsive to any teachers. So, you know, we got him looked at, and they said, hey, he's on the autism spectrum. He's, you know, they threw around the word Asperger's. He's got all these things. We want to medicate him. And we were like, absolutely not, 100%. No, we're not. I'm not drugging my kid. So also started doing all the research on what do you do with food and the brain, and how can you fix that? What do you do? And so we started removing the gluten and the sugar from his diet, and started seeing dramatic behavioral changes within him. So this is all around 2014. Well, 2015, we moved from Florida back to our hometown, Texas, which was a great move. I bought an old, you know, 2-bedroom house right next door to my dad. We bought it sight unseen. It was a total wreck, and we've been conducting renovations for the past 4 years on it. So it's a nonstop project. It's great. So, you know, and that's about when we went, we got into accidentally got into being keto. So when we moved, you know, Melody just she didn't buy any more grains. So we just kind of ran out, and I didn't have a job, and I was just teaching shooting courses and doing like business days and teaching people how to manipulate guns and small unit tactic stuff and just fun stuff. And I lost like 20 pounds, and I didn't even know what happened. I wasn't working out because I still wasn't back in a real good physical shape. So that's when we started getting into keto. And that was, you know, 4 years ago that we really got heavy into it. And we just saw great results, not only with us as far as, you know, mood, energy, weight control, but also with, you know, my son, who all of a sudden he's this bright, vibrant, intellectual child that I used to not be able to even have a conversation with because he wouldn't look me in the eyes. He had to look off in the corners because any confrontation sent him into a tailspin. Now he's this kid that you can't get to stop talking.
I love it.
So just seeing those things, you know, when we started doing the ketogenic diet, made us complete believers. And, you know, we continued our journey. You know, I became a personal trainer. My wife she's a nutritional therapy practitioner now through the NTP program.
Nice.
So that's pretty much made that our lifestyle. Is we love to talk to, you know, and help people find their health. And we try not to be, sometimes I get a little abrasive because that's just who I am. You know, because I believe in what I'm doing. I've seen the results. When you've seen a child change, you know, when you've dealt with people that had Alzheimer's and you've helped them and you've seen improvement and change, you start to believe in what you're doing. And when people tell you that all that's just, you know, it doesn't work, or that's a placebo effect, or you know, that you can't do that long term, you hear all these things and you're like, hey, I've been doing this for over 4 years. You can't tell me I can't do this long term.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Steve, I want to ask real quick. When you talked about your evolution and everything, for those who don't know you, give us some numbers like your height, what your weight was, wherever you got up to, just so people can kind of get a point of reference of your physical size.
Mm-hmm. Standard size for me, I'm 5'9", so I'm not a tall guy. And when I was, doing triathlons, probably up until 40, I was about 165. That was my weight, because I was always running, swimming, biking. I was constant activity. In my job, you couldn't be overweight, because the peer pressure that you would get and the ribbing you would get was just overwhelming for anybody that was overweight. So, and nobody wants to be that, because when I was 38, I was in Afghanistan walking through mountains at 10,000 feet chasing bad guys. You can't be out of shape. It's not possible.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of pressure to stay in shape. So I was always around the 5'9", 165, 170. And then towards the 40, 41 years when I got out, and then I started kind of noticing that I had to work out harder to maintain the weight. And then after I had my spinal surgery, I was down for probably a solid 8 months. I was inactive. I couldn't do anything. You can't pick up anything over 20 pounds, and you can't do all this stuff. So I got up to about 200 pounds. And that was when I'm like, hey, these pants don't fit anymore. I've always worn this size pants, and now I can't get into any of my pants. So, and I know a lot of guys are like, hey, 200 pounds, that's nothing. I know, I've seen Gormy's story, and he was up there. But when you come from your background is, I've always been in shape. I've always been able to do this. Just putting on that extra 30, 35 pounds was a really big deal.
Right. Wow.
So, being able to kind of get that off, and it's been a journey, just like everyone else. It's not like, just all of a sudden I changed something and I dropped 30 pounds, just like everyone else I hear on the thing, they drop, 10 pounds and then they stall. And then, you try something else, and then you break a plateau. And I still have health issues. I have my left knee is what I call a piece of crap. I've been dealing with it for the past decade. I went to an orthopedic surgeon, 10 years ago, and they told me to stop running. I have zero cartilage in that knee. I've had an ACL replacement. So I deal with I've dealt with a lot of pain. And in about 2015, it was at the point where I couldn't walk around the Target or Walmart without having to stop and gather myself because it hurt so bad. So, ibuprofen and Aleve that's an everyday vitamin. You take it every single day just to get through the day. And what we found with keto was, all of a sudden, your knee it's not locked. It's mobile. It doesn't hurt. There's no arthritis. And you're like, wow, this is absolutely crazy that I'm not taking anything for pain anymore, but now I can run 6 miles again and I don't have any issues.
Incredible.
Well, and it is extremely incredible. And, we did 4 years of keto. And then about 20 months ago, we decided to do a carnivore experiment, because we're big into the low carb community. And we've been to all but one of the Low Carb USA conferences that go on out in San Diego and down in West Palm Beach. And we've been to KetoCon. So we love going to all of those. So, we started hearing about the carnivore diet about 2 years ago. We started hearing about people trying the carnivore diet. And I'm one of those guys. I grew up, I never liked fruits and vegetables. My parents forced me to eat them at the table. If it wasn't a pork chop or a hot dog or a hamburger, I didn't want it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I mostly ate. And looking back on my childhood, a lot of times I would not eat dinner because I didn't like the food. So I did a lot of forced intermittent fasting without even knowing what it was. And I'm like, I never had a cavity in my life. I've never had a cavity. And it's, people always ask me that. They're like, you've never had a cavity? I'm like, no, when I was a kid, I just wanted to eat meat. I didn't want fruits and vegetables. So when I started hearing about this carnivore diet, I'm like, you know what? I don't like vegetables anyway. So let's go ahead and do a 30-day experiment just to see what happens. And that 30 days has now turned into 20 months.
Mm.
And
oh my gosh.
We've just kept going because we keep seeing really good health results.
Mm-hmm.
Is your son following that too?
He is following he kind of is, but he takes his lunch to school. So in his lunch, he'll have things like an RX bar or a Laura bar. He has he when he packs his lunch, he uses like some turkey or some ham meat wrapped in cheese, and that's his lunch.
Uh-huh.
So, and then for dinner, he doesn't like steak, which is kind of weird to me because I eat a lot of steak. He prefers just hamburger. So we just make him, mostly he gets hamburger meat, or he likes barbecue, so brisket and other meats like that. But for breakfast, he just eats eggs and sausage. So he's on a probably, I would say, a 75 to 80% carnivore diet.
Not bad, honestly. That if you factor in the fat of those particular elements, the ground beef and things like that, he's getting at least like a 1-to-1 ratio of fat to protein, probably.
Oh yeah, he we make sure he gets he's getting in the fat because he's 16, he goes to school, he plays soccer, so he needs he needs to as much as he can, and we don't limit him on food. He eats we keep apples, so if he wants an apple, he can have an apple. We're not going to deny him any fruit.
Well, and when you're younger and you don't have metabolic derangement like I did at 35, whenever I was at my heaviest, that's okay. That his system is probably flexible enough. It can have an apple. He might not even eat the whole thing like the Vega kids don't. They just want a bite or two and then they're done. And so like an apple is not going to, be a crazy thing. He's going to bounce right back from that.
He does. It doesn't bother him at all. What when he does have problems is when he goes to see his other family and he's gone for a week or two, and they totally think what we do is just it's comical to them that we eat the way we do. So they don't follow that. So he'll eat pizza and macaroni and cheese, and they'll buy milkshakes. And, he basically goes off the rails. And when he comes back, we call it the adjustment period. There's about 3 days where he's very emotional. He's very confrontational. He cries a lot. I mean, it's totally weird. He's a completely different person when he comes back from those vacations.
Yeah.
Wow. That's unfortunate because you've obviously seen how this has impacted him and the success with it. So others not following that, that's a shame that they're missing out on that.
Well, they listen to the standard advice from doctors and dietitians, and I get it because those are supposed to be authorities in this arena. They're supposed to, what they tell you is supposed to work. But I'll tell you that both my kids had autistic behaviors, both of them. My oldest daughter had scoliosis, curvature of the spine, which that's a nutritional deficiency. If anybody doesn't know that, the reason your spine curves is because your body is stealing nutrients from your spine, and that's why it gets soft and it curves. So both my kids had issues, and I take responsibility for that because I fed them their food. What was on the table was what I gave them. And I took a lot of doctor's advice. One of the biggest mistake ever was giving my kids apple juice.
Yeah.
And, that was straight from the doctor. Give your apple juice. Yeah. Just give them apple juice. It's good for them. And, once you get educated, you look at apple juice and you're like, oh my gosh, this is nothing but sugar.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Sugar are probably the top 3 items in the ingredient list.
It absolutely is. And you feed them, being in the military, and we were a dual military family at that. So we were very busy back in the day. You don't get up, you get up early, 5 a.m, and you shovel cereal at your kids. So, hey, here's some healthy Kashi Goleen cereal. Eat this. And turns out it's not that healthy.
No, I ate that for a while, trying to do more whole foods and all that type of stuff. Whenever I was realizing I needed to do something, I was doing that, and I was drinking the fruit juice type, or the juicing, like superfruit that had the green juice, that has all the veggies and everything, trying to do good. And I look back at that, knowing what I know now, 2.5 years later, and I look back at that and I go, sugar. A lot of sugar. No wonder I loved it.
Yeah. No wonder it tasted great, and I wanted more of it. It's full of sugar.
But yeah, it didn't do me any favors. Not at all.
No, it doesn't. And I look back when I did triathlons, I carb loaded all the time. I thought if I didn't have enough carbs, I was never going to make it. But when I did do anything long, say I did a 30 or 40-mile bike ride, I had to carry at least 3 or 4 refuel packets of goo or some type of sugary drink I had in my water bottle, because if I didn't refuel every 45 minutes, I would crash.
Oh, I bet.
And now I look at that, and we've started doing this. We're always experiment with something different. So right now we're doing where we only eat our food in a 4-hour window during the day. So we'll eat from 11 to 1400 ish. We'll fit all of our food in that window. So we're eating the same amount of food we ate before, but we only do it in that 4 hours.
Yeah.
So we'll finish eating at around 1:30 or 2, and then we won't eat again until the next eating period. And that next morning from 9 to 10, you're about 18 to 20 hours fasted.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, I found, is by far the best time to work out.
Yep.
So
I'm curious. I want to ask one more thing about your son before we get back on your story here. We had a guest on a week or so back, Tony, whose mother was dealing with dementia, and she had a weight problem and whatnot. And he referenced in his discussion on the podcast about his research in Facebook groups and different things like that, and started, finding people who were doing similar things with their elderly parents. That this idea of being on bed rest and just eat whatever they want. Well, it wasn't helping them with their dementia, let alone their physical size as well. Did you find any other families, any other people who were doing similar things with their kids and finding similar success at all?
No, and I was kicked out of multiple groups for posing that I could help them with their child by changing their diet.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
I've heard of similar for diabetic groups that former diabetics that were hardcore diabetics. They had major issues and they've totally changed their lives around. They go into the diabetic groups and they try to make a difference, and they get either kicked out or they get laughed out because they just leave out in a storm because I'm telling them the truth and they won't listen. They always leave basically.
And that's what you have to do, because you share that with one person, you put it on one post, and you get people coming out of the woodwork to tell you that you're going to kill people and that you're crazy and you're listening to garbage science and that's not, human diet. You can't do that. It's all in the brain. And, now what everyone is discovering now, like most of the articles I see that come out are talking about, how to fix the gut to fix the brain. And we've been saying that for years. Mm-hmm. And so now they have all this research that shows that everything that happens in your brain happens in the gut first.
Yep.
And that completely explains the autistic behaviors, especially my son, because I started doing research, and hear all this research about, the microbiome and what crushes it and what makes it thrive. And I start listening to other people talking about, the antibiotics that he used for pneumonia. And when he was 5 years old, he almost died from pneumonia. And he went through multiple rounds of very strong antibiotics. And that is when all the behavioral issues started to appear. So if you start going down the rabbit hole and you're like, oh, so what happened is he was sick. Okay. So he probably had a weak immune system from poor diet. And then he gets sick. They crush his gut with antibiotics. And now he's even more deprived of nutrients because, you have no way to absorb proper nutrients. So this is where all the behavioral issues start happening in school and at home, where he won't listen and he screams a lot and has all these outbursts. So I start, tracking it all back that, that's exactly what it was. We destroyed his microbiome. And now his brain could not function correctly, not in school, not at home, not at all.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Wow.
It's amazing. And again, everybody knows hindsight's 20/20. We can go back all day long and figure out, what decisions we made that were incorrect and how they were, but we have to take responsibility. I have to take responsibility for the fact that I didn't provide proper nutrition for my kids when they were growing up. And that's not completely my fault, because I was following basic protocol from what doctors gave me. And the problem with most people who have autistic children is when you start telling them that the reason their child is that way is because of the food you're feeding them, that places the responsibility on them. And that's a huge burden to bear.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, putting your hands around that idea that it is a nutritional thing and not something else is probably foreign to a lot of people. But clearly, with your family's experience, you've found a path that others need to follow or at least consider to see that change in their kids.
And that's one of those things is once you've seen the change, you want to share it with everybody. And you think you've got this great message that everybody is going to openly receive. And they're going to be like, oh, that's great. Oh my gosh, let's do this. And it's almost completely the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
They tell you that you're lying, that your child wasn't really autistic. I get the same things in the anxiety, depression, and PTSD, forums, because I had PTSD. I did 20 years in one of the most difficult career fields in the military that they have to offer. And, I've been in situations where, a lot of people get killed, and they're not always bad guys. Sometimes the good guys get killed, and you have to deal with that. And that causes, the post-traumatic stress that you don't even realize you have until after everything's over. And, right when I retired, I had issues, and I didn't have extreme PTSD. Like I wasn't, I didn't have issues where I had outbursts. I had small things like I would lose control of my anger in traffic. Like, just uncontrollably, I would want to hurt the person in front of me for absolutely, no reason. I would wake up in the middle of the night and I would feel like that somebody was in my house, and I had to get out of bed. I had to get my gun and I had to clear the house inside and outside, or I could not go back to sleep. And those aren't huge issues, but those are signs of post-traumatic stress. And you have to recognize that. And those have completely went away once we went to keto.
Oh my word. Wow.
So, and post-traumatic stress is not exclusive to just people in the military. It's, first responders, it's nurses, it's anybody that's driving down the highway that gets in a car wreck. Afterwards, they're going to have some post-traumatic stress. So it happens to everybody. So I don't want to make it sound like it's exclusively to anybody in the military. It's not. Mm-hmm. It happened to, factory workers. If if you're at a factory and somebody gets their hand cut off on a machine, you're going to have some post-traumatic stress from that.
Yeah. In my very, very small way, I came away from my last job at a call center always feeling like I was going to end up losing my job for some random reason because I wouldn't meet a stat or I wouldn't sell enough X, Y, or Z or that type of thing. And whenever I got into my current position with my current company, I'm going, wait, I don't have to fear for my job. And it was completely subconscious. It was completely subconscious until I was in a situation where I no longer felt it. Now, I don't have that, thing that you have where I have to clear the house or anything, but because you've kind of resolved that luckily. But I realize that there was this thing, there's this stress that I totally didn't know I was feeling. And so we can have it on average. They say that call centers other than military are probably one of the most stressful jobs. And I absolutely believe it.
I do too. That is a very stressful job. And that's the point is like, there's other stress besides just, being in the military or being a police officer. Those are taken stressful jobs, but people underestimate the level of stress that someone that worked at a call center has. Mm-hmm. And so, when you start talking about you have anxiety and depression and you work at a call center, well, that's an environmental stress that you have to deal with. And humans are supposed to be able to deal with stressors like that. We are built for tragedy. That's just the way it is.
Yeah.
And so when normal people can't deal with, they have anxiety for almost no reason sometimes, or they have problems dealing with confrontation, or they just feel depressed, there is a nutritional deficiency most likely with what's going on, because humans, for all of eternity that we've been here, we've had stressful lives. I mean, nobody gets out alive. We're all not going to make it. And when we lived in a cave and we were always being hunted by other animals, that was stressful.
Mm-hmm.
So we're set up to deal with that, because if we weren't set up to deal with that, we wouldn't be here right now.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's an interesting. That saying it that way it's not something I've ever heard it said, but it totally makes sense in comparing the two. I agree. We should have a healthy fight or flight because we were developed to have such a thing. And so if it's not working right, the fight is perking up too often, then we need to find out why that's out of balance. And I agree. I think a lot of it comes down to nutrition. The brain is only as healthy as the rest of the body.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that people should not have anxiety, or
Sure.
they're not going to get depressed. That's all going to happen. The point is that we're supposed to bounce back from it. We're very resilient. Humans are. We're super resilient. Your body wants to keep going. Your brain wants to function. It's very difficult to die. Like, your body does not want to shut down. It always wants to keep going. So we're very resilient. So the fact that anxiety and depression is running rampant in our society now it makes you question what's going on. And I trace it back to diet. It's nutrient deficiency.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's certainly something you've proven to be true, at least for you.
Mm-hmm. I would like to know about your wife's story a little bit. I know it's the Keto Man's Club podcast, but you and your wife co-host a podcast, and you said she's a chef, certified nutritionist, and whatnot. So, kind of tell us a little bit more about her and her journey with this way of eating.
So she has a lot of great stuff to say about it. And again, we have a podcast called The Tactical Kitchen Show, and we have a website called The Tactical Kitchen. And the reason we came up with that name was we were kind of, rolling around, hey, let's start a health coaching website. What are we going to call it? My background is in the military. Her background was as a chef. So, we just wanted to combine the tactics, being tactical, with how you operate, what you eat, and what you do, and combine that and just take it into the kitchen, because you should be purposeful and tactful in the kitchen. So that's how we came up with the name for the show. Her background, like I said, she's trained. She went to culinary school. She's basically tried every diet out there on the planet and can talk you through it. She knows more about food than I know about anything. So I'm very lucky in that aspect, that I found someone that is able to, pretty much tell you anything you want to know about whatever food it is. I play Stump the Chump all the time and be like, well, what is this food? And she'll be like, oh my God, that's this food from this plant. And I'm like, how do you know that? So I'm just very lucky in that. And she saw a lot of the same things that I saw when we started, gradually going into this ketogenic way of living. Is you start to lose weight, and you're like, hey, I'm slimming down, but it doesn't feel like I'm doing anything. Your energy and mood just increases.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that she talks about all the time, with her clients, is that for a female, your menstrual cycle becomes very easy. And she talks about how, ever since high school, she suffered from really difficult cramps. And when you're cramping all the time, and guys get cramps too, just not as much as women do, it makes it very difficult to be a good person all the time. So she talks about how, that she doesn't have difficulty with her cycle anymore. It just kind of comes and shows up, and then it goes away. And she's like, oh, well, that wasn't a big deal. So, talking to women about them. And okay, so this is the Keto Man's podcast, but hey, if you want your wife to be easy to get along with and happy all the time, hey, throw the keto out at them.
Happy wife, happy life.
That's the way it is. And since we're talking about the happy wife, happy life, I'm going to throw this out, because we talk about this all the time, about what we should tell people to get them to go keto. And I'm going to throw out sex life, man. If you want the junk to work like it worked when you were 18, keto and carnivore is the way to go. Because I feel like, when you talk about how good you feel, people don't often talk about how good they feel in the bedroom and how good stuff works. Because I suffered from what I considered low libido and a malfunction of the junk. Probably when I was before we went keto, about 43, 44, it started happening where, when you're getting busy in the bedroom, and everything's good to go. When the end comes, there's no explosion, there's no fireworks, there's like a fizzle or a pop.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, well, this is BS, man. What the hell's going on? This is not what it used to be. And you start to convince yourself that, oh, hey, that's just the way it is. I'm 44. Everybody talks about how your testosterone goes down and you have low libido and your sex life is just not the same. Man, I'm here to tell you, after, going keto, and then even the next step when we went carnivore, man, it is, if you remember when you were a teenager and you woke up with erections that were painful and you're like, is this ever going to go away? That's how I feel.
Yeah. I've experienced similar with my journey, and I'm also, I was certifiably low T before all of that, and now I'm in much better shape with all of that, and so I can attest to that. Sex has been much better since, and that's a very good plus. That's for sure.
It's one of the best benefits that I can give to somebody. Like,
Yeah.
hey, why should I try this? I'm like, well, does your manhood work? Because if you want it to work good, I'm telling you, you should try this.
Yeah. Well, let's see. We've been going for a little while here, and we don't want to take up all your night. Let's chat for a bit about you mentioned your coaching business and some of this stuff. Let's talk maybe about some of the success stories, maybe a little more in detail about the things that you are able to do with your clients and what they offer. You've already mentioned the website tacticalkitchen.com, which is good. But what other, what stories can you share regarding that would be encouragement? Because the truth is, some guys really like that idea of, oh, I've got to do it alone. And sometimes we really need a coach. So talk to us about that.
And that's a great point, because originally when we thought about kind of getting into the health coaching business, I was skeptical because I was like, this, why do people need a coach? It's just tell them to eat this food. It's not that hard.
Mm-hmm.
And as we started doing it, and then we started taking on clients, it became very apparent of why people needed a coach, because there's a lot of confusion out there. And we've had a lot of clients. Again, most people come to this for weight loss. They're like, hey, I want to lose some weight. And then when you start peeling back the onion, if it's a guy, he's like, oh, I've got low T.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh, wow, okay, low T. Oh, and I take Xanax every night before I go to bed.
Oh, well, that could be why.
Yeah. So, or I'm taking high blood pressure medication. So many things that guys are taking, and you start peeling back at the onion. You're like, hey, you're not healthy because you're taking all this medication, especially people that, take statins. Mm-hmm. So, what we do is we again, we're health coaches. We're not doctors. So we recommend that everything we do, you need to talk to your doctor. And if you're on a medication, you need to, ask him if you can come off. And then you start walking down this keto or carnivore path, whichever one you choose. And, we just slowly started them down that path. And we want to go, we're guys. Most guys are like, you tell me to do this, I just go do it. The problem is that sometimes we do it too hard. And there's, repercussions. And if you guys have been down this path, you know that when you first change, there's bowel issues. All right. Mm-hmm. Your bowels are going to change. So you're going to have diarrhea. Dealing with rashes. A lot of people get these weird rashes when they go keto, and they think that keto is causing the rash, when actually it's a detoxification from all the oxalates and, toxins that you've taken in.
Mm-hmm.
So having a coach to be there to tell you that, oh no, that's not keto rash. That's a detoxification rash, and it's going to go away.
Yeah.
Having people have issues with their, whether or not they have a gallbladder, or they get pancreatitis, and they'll start blaming their pancreatitis because they went keto. When it's just that you're making your pancreas work. You're making it do something after being low fat for 25 years. And now you're eating fat, your pancreas has to work. And it's sluggish. So you need to encourage it to work by taking these digestive, bitters or enzymes and getting it to function again. Those are the reasons that people need a coach. And even, I've had people's doctors contact me and say, why are you telling my patient to go keto and it's causing their pancreatitis? I'm like, and it's almost baffles me that this is a doctor asking me these questions and you can't figure it out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, that's the reason we found that people need coaches. And it's also because it's someone to lean on. Like, you don't feel all the pressure. I was lucky. My wife is a genius when it comes to food. So I'm so lucky. I can't even tell you guys how easy it is for me to have a wife that totally buys into, she drives it. She drives the diet. She's like, hey, you want to do carnivore? I'm like, yeah, I want to do carnivore. Who doesn't want to do that? So, and she takes me down that road. And so I'm not fighting with her to get there, which for me is just awesome. But, being a nutritional therapy practitioner, she focuses on people from what food they eat to, how they digest it.
Mm-hmm.
Do they absorb it? What happens in their intestines all the way, out the last end, because, digestion starts in the mouth and it ends when it goes out the back end.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and you always start when you talk about any of these issues, people that have irritable bowel syndrome or they have, diverticulitis or ulcerative colitis, you start at the top.
Mm-hmm.
You start in the mouth and down into the stomach. And that's where you start figuring things out.
Yep. That's really cool. And the NTP program that she finished, I know Jimmy Moore's wife has done it, and quite a few others are in the keto space have started to get into that. And it's an accreditation that for them is very powerful. It gives them something, a name, something to put behind their name that means something. And it really does mean something. The science that, the little bit of science that I've, picked up that they've talked about, I'm going, wow, they're not kidding around. This stuff is in depth and it's systemic. Like, this is how the body works type stuff. And so it's really cool to see more and more resources of that nature available.
It's a very intensive course. I was lucky because she's taken the course and I kind of get to go along with it. The only thing I couldn't do is they have little conferences that they go to and they learn, how to touch the body and feel in places to detect if you're having issues, like whether or not you're having problems with your liver or your adrenal glands or your gallbladder. So they learn to push and do palpitations on the body and use that as a treatment.
Steve, I'm kind of curious about that. Not so much the touching part, but have you found, or maybe even more so your wife, does everybody respond the same to keto? Because that's one of the questions that I've seen more than once in our group of where guys, again, we're taking it at face value, but they're saying that they're doing it right and they're not seeing the results. And we're not talking I've done it for 48 hours, I should have lost 20 pounds by now. But they're 2-3 weeks in and they don't really feel like they're getting it. Have you guys seen in your clients, in your other interactions, whatnot, where, keto is, if you follow it, it works kind of thing? Or have you ever seen an instance of where it hasn't come through?
Most of the time when we find that we're dealing with a client and they say it's not working, it's because there's something they haven't told us. It's either a medication that they've held back that they didn't tell us about, or they're ingesting something that they associate as a non-factor, but it is a factor, so they don't report it. That's mostly what happens, is because we'll be coaching someone and they'll have an issue and it's not resolving, or they'll be trying to lose weight and they're just not getting there, and we'll be talking to them, and all of a sudden they'll go, oh, hey, I'm doing this. And you're like, crap, that's it right there. That's the thing. And I'm not saying that's with everybody. And definitely I'm not like most doctors who believe their patients are just lying to them. That's why you're not losing weight. You're lying to me. We think that some people they don't think to talk about everything that they do, everything that they drink. Like for me, one of the big things for me to take out was dairy. And I didn't realize it was dairy until I eliminated it 100%. Because, we were lucky. We lived not too far from a dairy that had organic, milk, raw organic milk. And it was delicious. We loved having it. And then it ran out, so we didn't have it. And while I was drinking it, I was having some knee problems. I was having a stiff knee. It was kind of sore when we started drinking more dairy. And so I was like, man, once the dairy went away, my knee got better. And then I started having knee problems again. And what it turned out was it was just all the dairy I was having was I had some heavy cream in a cup of coffee, just one cup of coffee. And I was eating a dessert. So Melody would make a dessert. She takes heavy whipping cream, whips it up, puts some cacao in there to kind of flavor it. And then, you can sprinkle a little bit of nuts on it if you want, or you can just eat it like ice cream. And it was delicious. And we do that maybe once or twice a week. But it wasn't until I eliminated the heavy cream, the heavy whipping cream, and any cheese that I saw huge results in my joint pain, and I started losing weight again. So, now I'm down at that lean 175 and I can work out diligently.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's that's probably not the only thing that you see that does this. That's probably just one factor. What are some of if you had like 2 or 3 different items to list as like items to avoid, what would you suggest?
A lot of times you have to look at, if you're having a stall or an issue, you need to look at artificial sweeteners.
Mm-hmm.
Like how much of the artificial sweeteners are you taking in? You got to take a hard look at dairy, and that includes cheese and heavy cream, things that you don't really think are that much. You got to take a hard look at them. Also you have to take a look at certain vegetables, because people will overeat the wrong kind of vegetables. They'll go keto and they'll eat some meat with a little bit of fat on it, but they will overdose on vegetables.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a firm believer that people shouldn't eat spinach. Like, I don't think spinach is worth a crap. Because spinach has a lot of oxalates in it.
Mm-hmm.
So there can be people, if they're very sensitive to anything that has an oxalate in it, they can be having joint pain. It can be causing rashes. All these things that can happen, and people will contribute that to the keto diet, but they won't think about it being the spinach or the Brussels sprouts or the asparagus, or the broccoli.
Yeah, that makes sense. We don't do a ton of those things, but those are all things that we do. But my wife is pretty good about keeping portion sizes down pretty small. Maybe down too much, because that's something I'm having to work with. But the portion sizes, at least for the vegetables, aren't too terribly large. So Alberto told us to ask one question. That's all he had for us, and that was pre-workouts. How do you feel about them?
Oh, so I tell I train young athletes to come to the Air Force to be special operations. And I tell them all, if you're taking a pre-workout, you're already broken, because that's all they're going to do for you is they're going to break you eventually. And all these guys live, and I don't want to be a hypocrite. I did it. I was, I'm old enough to where I was around when creatine came out. I was around when everybody started breaking, massive protein shakes.
Mm-hmm.
And I was around when pre-workouts came out, and being in the job I was in, having to stay in really good shape, pre-workouts became an addiction. Mm-hmm. Whether it was Jack 3D or NO Explode or C4, we became connoisseurs of pre-workouts like people are of wine or beer.
Yeah.
The guys would stand around and go, "So what are you taking this morning? You taking what do you want? Explode? I can tell you've got that red rashy thing going on." But you take them and they're going to destroy your gut, because they've got all these artificial sweeteners in it that are going to destroy your gut. They're going to blow your adrenal glands, because guys are going to drink a cup of coffee like I did, and then they're going to come to work and they're going to take a pre-workout because they got to have it for the workout, and they're going to blow their adrenal glands, right off of their livers.
Yeah.
So I tell all my guys, if you're taking a pre-workout, you're broken. You don't need it. You should not need it to work out.
Yeah. Speaking of working out, that's a perfect segue. I actually saw a note that he left for us to touch base about what your training regimen would be.
Man, that's a great question. I've always been the ADHD workout person. I do what I like when I want to do it. For example, today I did, went out there and my wife told me to work out. This is the workout that she did this morning. So it was a 400-meter sprint. And then you did 15 overhead squats. And then you did that 5 times as fast as you could go. So, and that was totally horrible because I just ate about 2 pounds of meat. And yeah, I was like, my belly's so full, but I need to go work out.
You're mimicking Sean Baker right there.
Yeah. Well, when you eat in that 4-hour window, there's not a whole lot of time. Like
No.
you got to squeeze it all in there. And I ate quite a bit today, but we're experimenting with it. But I like to do everything. I swim a lot. I like to bike. I enjoy running. However, that's hit or miss with me. Sometimes I can run 3 miles. Sometimes it's 6. It really depends on how the old joints are working that day. But I like to lift too. We get out there. We have a gym right out back under our carport. We call it our prison gym. And we like to go out about 4 in the afternoon when it's about 100 degrees, and sling the weight around for about 2 hours. Just get under just learn some stuff. And we've been getting into learning barbell complexes and how to do overhead squats and how to do a muscle up. We've been really toying with those things because it's just so fun.
You would love the Keto Savage gym, I think.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We've talked about it. I'd love to go work out there. It'd be great.
So let's wrap things up with you, Steve. You've been very gracious with your time, and we don't want to take too much of that. Let's recap real quickly. Where can people connect with you, whether it be social media, your website, resources that you have out there? Let's do the rundown of all that.
So, we have our podcast, The Tactical Kitchen Show, and that's online as The Tactical Kitchen Show. And we have thetacticalkitchen.com, which is just, our website for any health coaching or personal training that you're looking for out there. We love to connect with people and help them with that. On Instagram, I'm Stephen the Gray, but I'm horrible at all social media. And I'm on Facebook as well. So just Steve Barrons on Facebook. If you go to my profile, it's me. You can't miss it.
Well, you are in the group as well.
Yes, I am in the Keto Man's podcast as well. I don't post a whole lot because again, I'm not the person that was in there that I lost a bunch of weight. I'm trying to cruise along, and I'm almost 50, but I'm trying to be just as good at 50 as when I'm 80.
Yep, absolutely. Well, and we really appreciate you being here. We will put all the links in the show notes so that people can easily click on a link and get to you. So that will be great. And we really appreciate you sharing your story, you taking the time to be with us tonight.
Absolutely.
So you saying, you gave me a perfect segue. Us podcasters, we know how to do things. We're going to highlight a couple of our group members here real quickly. And mine that I'm going to highlight, he pretty much just found his why. I'm not even going to name him. I'm just going to say he's in his early 30s, and he related a story about, he found out today that his dad pretty much had a heart attack last night and passed out, and got a pacemaker in this morning and all this stuff. And he's very distant in location wise from his dad, so he can't be there. He's kind of feeling down about it, but his realization came. His dad's about 70, and he says, I need to be around for my kids at 70. And I need to be in the most healthy standpoint I can, just as healthy at 50 or 30 in this case, as I am going to be at 70 or 80, because I want to be here a long time for them. And my response to him in the Facebook post was, I think you found your why. And I think I want to call this out because I want to remind folks your why is really important. And you need to lock it in. And sometimes the why can shift a little bit because maybe you get to a goal and you're like, oh, okay, well, I'm here. Set your eyes on another target. Find another why. Find another thing that lights the fuel under your ass so that you can keep going. You use that to your benefit and let it drive you to be the best that you possibly can for all of your days while you're on this particular planet. So that's my call out. Jim, how about yours?
Well, it was a gentleman who's been mentioned. It was mentioned in tonight's podcast, but he's been a guest on the show in the past, Mike Gorman. Great guy. If you have not listened to the Fat Guy Forum podcast, you are missing out. It's not specific to keto, but there is a lot of keto discussion in there. But just some of the stories and the guests that he have are incredible. But good old Mike Gormy, at one point was in an 8XL shirt, and he posted a photo up from the last couple of days. The dude is wearing a large. And I mean, the transformation that this guy has gone through mentally, physically, and everything is absolutely incredible. And to get to that point where you're like, you don't have to shop online and find something so big because no store stocks it, to you can walk in any store and grab a shirt off the rack and put it on and walk out the door kind of thing. Not that I'm advocating theft, but it's just a remarkable thing. And the guy is a great supporter of our members and whatnot. So just a big, large, pun intended, congrats to Gourmet on hitting that milestone.
Agreed. Well, I think any other business that you want to take on?
Do you want to share about our new hotline?
Oh, yes. Let's talk about that. Let me get the number up here real quickly. So we have a new way for our listeners and our members to drop us a line. And we want to hear from you guys. We want to get your questions and comments. And we want to be able to answer those. So this is kind of one of those things where we're setting up a voicemail line that you can leave us a message, and then it might be used in the future for a podcast that we can answer the question for. And the one or two questions that we've gotten so far have been pretty solid. And I've got strategies, even though they're tough ones. I've got strategies on how to answer them. So we're gonna do that pretty soon. But the phone number that you can call for that is area code 512-518-6161. That will be added to the show notes as well, so that you can use that to get in contact with us. And you can also email us at ketomansclubpodcast@gmail.com. You can connect with our Instagram at Keto Man's Club Podcast. And if you visit our website, theketomansclub.com, it's going to take you to a link tree that will connect you to all of us in all of the places. So in addition to the links that we have in the show notes, you're going to be able to use that to easily get in contact with any of us outside of the Facebook group or inside.
And speaking of new stuff, one for the link tree also. So we have created a page for the Keto Man's Club podcast on Facebook. So this all, as all of our regular listeners know, this all started from a closed group on Facebook. You have to be admitted, so to speak, in order to be part of the group. But as our podcast has grown and people are sharing the stories and learning more about what we are putting out there for those following this way of eating, we don't want to deny anybody the opportunity to learn a little bit more about the podcast. So if you go to facebook.com/the Keto Man's Club podcast, just like the title is of the show, you will be able to get to our directory and our listings of shows and whatnot, and see what's going on, and follow along, share things a little bit more easy, what have you, because we're not only on iTunes, but a lot of different podcast forums. So you can check it out through Facebook as well. So give that a like, share those shows as well if you're following Keto Way of Eating, and away we go.
Yeah, absolutely. So that pretty much wraps it up for us. We missed Alberto, but we'll see him again next week for the next episode. That's it for this week. Until next time, make sure to eat meat, lift heavy, sleep, and repeat. Thank you for joining us for the Keto Man's Club podcast. Your support means the world to us. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Would you help us spread the word about the Keto Man's Club by sharing with your friends and family? We're available on all podcast platforms, so just search for Keto Man's Club and you'll find us. If you would like to connect with us, you can do so a number of ways. Our web address leads to our Facebook group, theketomansclub.com. That's TheKetoMansClub.com. You can also follow us on Instagram at Keto Man's Club Podcast. Lastly, if you have any comments or questions, feel free to reach out via email to ketomansclubpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you again for joining us today, and we look forward to hanging out with you again next week.